did this once, so this time it's going to be even better. Last time, if I remember correctly, well, there is no last time. It didn't happen.
If it wasn't recorded, it didn't happen.
The first topic that I wanted to discuss was the differences in magic items, like over the years. I'm sure you have even more to talk about with that than I do. Essentially, just how the different editions treat magic items, like your insight on that, how you view that.
Yeah, I think magical items, in my opinion, based on my sphere of influence, like the D&D that I have played since 1989, in role-playing games, uh, magical items have like lost in, how do I put this? Become more common but lost importance. So I feel like magical items back when I first started playing, and maybe this was just because I was like in the everything's new and fresh. But every magical item was much more like wondrous and exciting and cool, and made so much of an impact on your character and the way they existed. It really like shaped who your character was depending on what magical items they had, even if they were simple magical items. And I noticed as the eds went on, the additions and the different kind of games I played, that magic items became kind of more like, oh, you get 7 magical items. They all give like minor enhancements.
Yeah, that is one thing that was done eventually. Yeah, basically, like you were talking about, in older editions, magic items meant more, depending on class, of course. The magic items meant more than your actual character's abilities a lot of time,
Right.
for better or worse.
Right.
But it
Yeah.
was kind of assumed that at higher levels you would get very interesting magic items that it would give you so many abilities that your character would change and basically become like a superhero based off of those.
Right. And I don't know. I think that as I've aged as a DM, I've become more like, okay, magic items shouldn't be what makes your character, unless that's the kind of player you're playing with.
There's probably a healthy medium, right?
Yeah. I don't want to sit at the table and go, well, I think that magical items shouldn't mean a lot, so you should. It's like, no, characters are going to want what they want, and so you have to know them and know what your characters want. But I think as when I run a game, I'm always trying to make sure magical items are like interesting and cool, and they add to the flavor. They can help build your character into a certain way. The possibilities are endless. I don't like the how would I put this? The I'm not a fan of magic items becoming like commonplace.
Yeah.
Because then they just lose their they lose their luster when it's just like, oh yeah, it's just a magical item. And then again, here's where I'm gonna every step of the way contradict myself. It also depends on your setting.
Right. I mean,
So
in our games, I would say magic items overall are fairly common. Like, I wouldn't
yeah,
say they're uncommon. Of course,
no,
there's
I wouldn't
differences
say
in
that either.
power of magic items, but
Yeah, yeah, they're not uncommon, but because with magical items, and if anyone's listening to this, it's like I'm gonna DM my first game. Gotta be super careful. Magical items, and maybe that's what all the toning down of them, the nerfing of magical items, I feel that happened in later editions was about. Magical items can really break a game.
yeah.
You've DM too, and so I'm sure like you
Yeah,
have
you
your
got.
wand of fire story.
Yeah, you always got to keep in mind balance. My first game ever gave the players. It was a random magic item, but I allowed them to have a wand of fire, and it pretty much made it impossible to balance everything. So that could definitely happen. Um,
Yeah,
my
yeah,
problem though is
and
the solution that they've come up with in latter years is just to make the game. I wouldn't say necessarily easy. D&D is as difficult as your DM and players want it to be, but to kind of
correct.
build in this like power fantasy. Sure, old games you get powerful, but the farther back you go in D&D, the lower power level the characters start at. So,
That's correct. No, I know what you're saying.
I
It's
mean,
very
I'm an
much
advocate. I'm an
like
advocate for not worrying about balance, but they're like you can't completely ignore it. Like it shouldn't be your main concern.
Right.
Though.
Right. Because then what you end up with is everyone is low level. You rolled loot. One character got the boots of speed. Right. This is a famous. I mean, I tell this as a tale all the time to new DMs. He got the boots of speed. Quickly, they find out that now the game is completely unbalanced because the rogue who has the boots of speed is an unstoppable force.
Yeah.
And in order to balance it out, you have to make enemies so strong that now the rest of the party is not balanced because they can't handle the things that the character with the boots of speed can't. And so you either end up nerfing an item the character already has, which upsets them, or you do what the DM did, which is steal the boots of speed, which
And
only more infuriated.
yeah, that's never a good solution.
They can make or they can so make or break your game. I mean, would you say that the Wand of Fire ruined that campaign?
It wasn't
too strong a
the
language?
sole reason. It was part of the whole thing. They actually got more powerful magic items, but that was because at that point it's like, why the fuck not? I'm already like throwing crazy stuff at them. But
Right.
But yeah, that was definitely a mistake. Looking back on it.
And I've done it too. I try to keep it as random as possible, where I like roll and I'm like, okay, you get this, but then I'll look and I'm like, bunch of level 3s, and they just got the Sun Sword. Nah.
Yeah.
Then
That's
you
one
have
thing
one
that
character.
some editions do better than others. They'll have like leveled treasure charts, whereas in second edition, you know, it's pretty much just completely random, which isn't always great.
It's true. It's a hard thing to do. I think that magical items, magic in general, but magical items really can be a game breaker and can really just ruin everything if you don't know what you're doing. And I think it's a early DM's trap to just be like, oh, everyone can have all the magical items. It may seem cool in the beginning, but quickly you're gonna sitting there going, what have I done? Like, what have I done?
But for us, it's a very rare thing. I can't think of in your games when that's ever happened, from my experience.
Yeah, I've worked, but this is a lesson I feel like I learned a long time ago, and so I'm always working to be like, okay, is this reasonable? I'm always adjusting what magical items can do. You always want the characters to feel like they're getting their power fantasy and the stuff they want and the cool factor, while also making it so that your job does not become impossible to DM. Now, my knowledge of D&D only runs to 3.5 because, you know, I just decided at a certain point, like, why keep buying books that tell me how to play the same game over and over again?
Exactly. Yeah. It's obviously so that the main benefit of new Dungeons & Dragons editions is that it gets new people into it, people who never touch it.
Yeah.
The main downside is it's just like a commercialized event now. It always has been, but
Yeah.
like the more editions come out, the more, I don't know. I don't even know how to say it. It just feels less and less like a game and more like just a product, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just with anything that becomes popular. And now it's not like D&D when I was a kid. Like, I was in that era where, well, luckily the school I went to, like, we didn't have like the cliques as much, and so even the football team played D&D. But you know, outside of that, you were a total loser nerd if you played D&D. I mean, like, you were judged harshly on that. And I had friends that, yeah. But regardless, that's slightly off topic. Magical items are definitely an important part of Dungeons & Dragons. So if you're DMing a game, you got to make sure you involve them. If your game involves that, because some people play games and are like, yeah, we're going to do low fantasy, which is cool.
Right, then you don't have to worry about it at all. But depending on the edition you play, that could actually unbalance the game, because some editions assume that the players will have magic items, so...
Correct. I think that you get the most ability to do that kind of stuff out of second ed.
Yeah, in second ed, you don't really need magic items. The problem with second ed is the balance. Balancing the game is completely on the DM's head. Like, the game doesn't assume any balance, like, really at all. Like, what is there's I don't think they baked any balance into the game, and that was pretty much on purpose. The classes have some level of balance, but monsters are just designed as like for purpose.
Yeah.
Magic items too. So
Well, another good discussion for that time would be the fact that I say right now that you can never balance it, and it's almost doing more harm than good to completely try to balance it. But
no, yeah, the attempts to balance the game, if anything, just removed a lot of the individuality from different classes and things. So
yeah, with magical items, you now once again I'm gonna sound like I'm contradicting myself. With magical items, you do have to try to balance. You do have to take into account what magical items everybody has, what they do, and what they can do for you. I see a lot of things when I go onto the horrible world that is the monstrous interwebs. But
D&D
DMs
Reddit,
saying like, "Oh,
where
yeah,
everything is
well,
just
that's
here's my my tiefling like bard who wears little to no clothes. Here's my art of that. That's everything on that
yeah,
site.
right." But they'd be like, "My game got broke because my character used magical item this way." It's like, what kind of DM are you? Like, you should know what they have, and
Yeah.
you should be like taking care of that and not controlling it and taking away agency, but definitely being like, okay, player should never truly be able to like ruin a game if you know what you're doing. Now, I just said that magical items can ruin a game. They can, because if the DM is not competent enough, or hasn't DM'd enough, or has enough forethought, or isn't willing to work hard enough, then yeah, they do.
The one problem obviously though is once you make that mistake for whatever reason, fixing it is becomes a very large issue. Because I think we touched on
It
it
does.
briefly, but how do you get a magic item out of a player's hands without like just straight up taking it?
Right. That's why I think it's important, unless it's just like a +1 magical sword or something, right? Because you just want to say, okay, the character's starting to fight were rats or things like this, and so we need to kind of like give them the ability to do so. Um, always remember like charges, time of day, under certain circumstances. Never hand the party a weapon that or an item that does something super fantastical that can just be used over and over and over again without any sort of rules to it. Always have some sort of rules to it, in my opinion, just so that you can help control the game more.
Yeah, I think I agree less on that. Like I tend to kind of just go with the flow. There are certain things I'm really careful about handing out. But
Mm-hmm.
because we play second edition, the balance is just it's kind of something you just have to react to based on how the party's growing every session. So you
Yeah,
could say that about other editions, but I think it's more true about second ed.
yeah, for sure.
As far as other editions, first and second edition magic items dictate a lot about a character's abilities. They're not necessary, but I think if you want a really powerful party that can eventually at high levels challenge, demons and stuff, they really do become necessary. I mean, if you're playing like a fighter and you have no magic items, it's really hard to keep up. In third edition, they're pretty much the same role. Characters have a lot more abilities though, so they're probably not as necessary, I would say. But one
Because
thing
all
I
your
want to
feats and
touch on
stuff.
is third edition's really weird attempt to balance magical item creation that makes absolutely no sense. I
Oh
think I,
yeah,
I think you know what I'm talking about. So
yeah, I do.
it just
Yeah,
it
the
boggles
whole
the mind to me.
I am Alakai the wizard, and I'm going to create this magical item. I
Oh,
lost 2
suddenly,
levels in the
yeah, suddenly my
process.
IQ dropped. I don't understand. I was a genius that I made this sword, and now I work at Burger
I'm
King.
stupid.
I shouldn't I
Yeah,
shouldn't
I don't.
impugn people who work at Burger King. That was rude of me. But anyways,
No, they're probably like, yeah, I get it, fam.
but yeah,
But
I just don't understand.
yeah, no, it doesn't make that. That was someone, I don't know who it was. That was someone's fail. Someone was like, this is a good idea, and no one was brave enough to be like, no, it's not. Like, you need to
Yeah,
stop.
because we went from making magic items gives you XP to making magic items takes away XP. I don't understand
Yeah,
the logic behind that. But either way, that's the
yeah.
case in third edition. So
I just don't like wizards are supposed to make magical items as part, not all of them, I guess, but like isn't that like part of every traditional great wizard's goal is to like make some magical loot?
yeah, make your own spells, make your own magic items. That's you're a mad
Right.
scientist.
Right. And so instead they end up with this you lose levels. I can't fathom it. It was just, I think it was a really big screw up on the part of designers. I mean,
Yeah.
no, I've never designed a game, but that
We
just
play
doesn't
a
make
lot
any
of them.
sense. What happens is people in third ed just don't want to ever do it. Like,
Yeah,
I've
I've
never had
never
anyone play
seen
third ed
that.
say, I'm going to make an item.
No.
As soon as they find out they're going to lose experience, they're like, nah.
Why? Who?
Yeah.
So that's third edition. There's still really important third edition, but third edition really tried for that balance thing, and they failed spectacularly. So good on them. Fourth edition, probably the most balanced edition of Dungeons and Dragons. Also, one of the weirdest. It has a lot of ardent fans, but we are definitely not among them.
No.
So, fourth edition did do some things right, but I think for the wrong reasons. Like the balance in fourth edition is pretty incredible, but by making all the classes balanced, they removed what made all the classes interesting. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But you were telling me that in newer editions, and people, if they listen, they'd be like, "Wow, he doesn't know that." Yeah, you're right. I do live in my own little world. That in the like fifth editions, like everyone can cast spells.
Yeah, there are certain ways. I believe it's. I haven't actually played fifth edition, but I've been like watching a lot of videos over time, and I did read up on the basic rules. But you can take like backgrounds and things that even if you're a fighter, you'll have minor spellcasting abilities. Obviously, introduced in 5th edition 2 is like the second wind mechanics, so a fighter can just heal themselves. It's not considered magic, but I don't know how a DM would rationalize it other than magic. I'm sure they can, but I don't know how we would. So
Yeah,
a fighter in 5th edition can just heal, which to us is an alien concept. I'm sure if anyone who plays a lot of 5th edition hears us talk about this, be like, why is that a problem? It's not really a problem. It's just the way we play. That doesn't make any sense. Like
yeah, it doesn't.
How like a fighter
Yeah.
is a fighting man. He is the least magical thing in the game. Rogues are more magical
Right.
by far. I
Right.
can't open my fucking
Absolutely.
inventory.
Yeah. So back on magical items, I find that over time, and I've played with, I have a solid, we have our solid group now, but I've played with who knows how many people over the decades, and people really love it when they get unique items, regardless of the level of power of that item.
Definitely.
Don't just focus on like the magic and the power. Like a lot of our players love it when they get items that have nothing to do with combat at all. Like I gave the party a figurine that turns into a giant housefly that's big enough for a man to ride on. And like people were more excited about that than any magical weapons they got. Because people love things of utility, and it's just so unique that it really, I mean, a hero is a hero, but the hero that saves a town while riding a giant magical fly, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Sheet of smallness, definitely my favorite magic item.
Sheet of smallness.
Doesn't even
You
do
should
what you
describe
think
that.
it would do.
You should describe it.
Well, the one you gave me was it was bright pink on one side and black and white checkered on the other, and this is literally like a twin-size bed sheet.
Yep.
And the only thing it does is if you place a magic item inside of the sheet and fold it up, the magic item is miniaturized to 1/12 the size.
Yep.
And then you reverse the sheet and put the miniaturized item in, and it becomes normal size. That's the only thing it does. And that was one of the coolest magic items I ever got.
Yeah.
My wizard wore it like a cloak, so he had this giant sheet over him. Looked like a total dork. Just how you know you're a real wizard if you look like just a total jack off.
Right.
But yeah.
But that was like your favorite though, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. I had more powerful magic items. Like I had the helm of teleportation, probably the most powerful magic item that character had. But it wasn't nearly as cool. So
you got to think outside the box with your magical items. You got to give people cool stuff, because I always try to think of it as, yes, magical weapons would be very commonplace, but wizards would make all sorts of crazy magical things. That's what wizards do. They wouldn't just keep making magical swords. In fact, they would probably make less magical swords unless being forced to by some lord or king or whatever. they'd probably make other stuff that would be like ease of life, just making their kind of like life easier, or like making, like boat in a box. I
Right.
mean, that's a terrific magical item. It's a small wooden box. You throw it, you yell boat, it transforms into a boat.
Which is a very violent weapon.
It is.
That's why I love the Encyclopedia Magica. I made that short video about it, because that's full of just all sorts of weird stuff.
And a lot of times my players will defeat like really hardcore like areas and scenes using items that weren't even intended for combat.
Yeah.
Like having a potion of whale that when you open it summons a whale, and throwing that at an enemy so that in midair it turns into a giant whale and crushes them.
That's all
Now
there
this
is.
stuff all sounds ridiculous. People are probably going, what kind of games do you play? Well, these items are like rare and few and far between. Not everyone's getting sheets of smallness. It's more common to get, a +1 crossbow.
Right.
But these are the items you throw in there once in a while to be like, hey, look at this cool thing. And the characters just get like so excited about it. That's what it's about. Get creative. Take the book, roll the magical item, and go, well, I'm not going to give you that, but you're going to get something close to it. You don't say that, of course.
Sometimes you say
It's,
it just to fuck with them, but
Yeah,
like
that's
you
true.
open
You
the
sit
book
there
and you
and
go,
be like,
"You're
nope.
not getting that." That's always fun.
They're like, aw.
What is it? Oh, it's just like Thor's hammer. Nothing serious. I mean, of course he
Nothing
would just leave it
serious.
lying around. I mean,
Mjolnir's just sitting there, chilling.
damn. So I think we touched on all the additions. Magic items over time have become less important because characters' abilities have just broadened.
Yeah.
Just to touch on it really quick one more time. Like, if you look at a second ed fighter, he can't do shit. You know what he
No,
can do?
he
He can
can't.
fight. That's it. That's the entire character class. And these days, fighters can like heal themselves. If you make them right, they can cast some magic. They can like do weird battle master tactics that I don't even know. It's a different game entirely. It's alien to us, which could be
Right.
fun. But the way we do it, it just doesn't make any sense.
Our group, just based on when I talk to them, like they don't, they're happy, and that's what you gotta do. You play D&D to be happy. They're happy with what we do. I know,
Yeah.
because either they're lying to me or they're but they like it. And hopefully everyone out there forever can find a group that they get the same kind of thing out of. So whatever game you're playing, that's cool, and it's okay to not like certain stuff.
Yeah, these like criticisms, if you even want to call them that, are only coming from our perspective. We realize that it's a game, so however you want to play it, of course. Just our view on how D&D has progressed. So now that we've gotten through the additions and how magic items function, the different additions, if you could run through how magic items are our homebrew rules, I guess you could say, for how magic items function.
You mean in the way that they're destroyed, or just in general, like from start to finish?
Well, right. In our games, not only, 'cause I think it's somewhat normal for magic items to be like super tough and all that stuff, but I think we take it like a step beyond that.
Oh yeah. So when I think of magical items, and I think of like a sword that can hit a ghost, which I mean silver can too, but or like a blade that's so sharp that it can cut through the sharpest of or the hardest of steel. That item should not be able to easily be broken. So if you find the dragon's hoard, you slay the dragon, you find out that the dragon was actually the good guy, so you save the dragon from the evil princess, whatever.
Yeah.
And
That's
inside the
classic.
treasure hoard, there's 10,000 years, nothing's been in there, but there's one sword that's untainted. If this sword is magical, so magical that it's kept a razor sharp honed edge over like 1,000 years, you shouldn't be able to break the damn thing over your knee. And if you do break it, if you are strong enough because you're a titan or you're a giant, or you take this item and hit it with the hammer of destruction, it shouldn't just break. There should be some sort of cataclysmic, that's too big a word, some sort of painful, dreadful occurrence to happen. So we have magical items kind of explode.
Yeah. That magic. The idea being that magic has to go somewhere.
Right.
So magic items
And
do have a sort of time limit on them. when you cast the permanency spell, it's not literally permanent, but it makes the spell
Right.
last like 1,000 years. And that's the
Right.
magic kind of bleeding off. But what happens if all of that magic is released in an instant?
Right. And so that magic has to go somewhere, right? So depending on your world, it has to go to the ether, the ethereal, the fourth dimension, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not going to do it like in a calm, cool, and collected way. That's a lot of magic that took to build this, the hammer of toe destruction. Like it didn't just
Dagger of
appear
Dolphin's
overnight.
Bane.
Yeah, dagger of Dolphin's Bane. Sword of Chihuahua slang.
Damn.
Like this stuff was created with an immense power, so it has to go somewhere. So our magical items are generally pretty much indestructible, like 99% indestructible, 90%
practically
indestructible.
indestructible.
And then we roll on the now we roll on an updated because we're always like reformatting and kind of updating our rules as we go. So think of our D&D game being second ed, like Diablo 1 with just continuous patches for 20 years.
Yeah. It's never
And
perfect.
so, no, but when it blows up, it releases wild magic or just like damages everything around it. So characters sometimes use it to their advantage, but it's super dangerous and it pisses off the goddess of magic. But
That's how we treat magic items in like a broad sense. But recently, it's actually become slightly of a problem. Over the years, I think our players have finally internalized these rules and started to abuse them. Which,
yeah, I would agree with that.
which is an important thing to talk about, that a lot of these homebrew rules, they work. You try and find a way to make them work for your players, and whatever works best for everyone. At the same time, you can never make rules that are perfect. So just like how in the actual editions, the printed rules, there's loopholes, especially more, third edition. It's really easy to do stupid stuff in third edition. Some people might recognize the phrase peasant railgun. It's a famous third edition thing.
Right.
Which is every peasant, you get like 1,000 peasants or whatever, they all hold a ladder. And every time they pass the ladder by the game's rules, they can like throw it and it picks up speed. So they all throw it at once and the ladder goes like 3,600 miles per hour and just obliterates whatever it hits. So rules can be dumb because it's hard to capture
They
reality or even like a made-up reality in rules. So
yeah, they totally can be done. Oh man, I'm just imagining that.
right.
Imagining all these.
And they like the first person throws it, the second person throws it an instant later. But it's happened so fast that by the time the last peasant throws it, it's going like thousands of miles per hour. And then it just obliterate, like, yeah. So rules are stupid. But you gotta always be working on them.
That's true. So because we modified it so that it wasn't always just like the characters just making these like small neutron bombs out of their magical items.
Right.
You catch on quick and you change it and you bring it up to your party and hey, look, this is more realistic, and then you change a little bit and it works. They're like, cool, we get it. So, all good stuff.
Yeah, sometimes these problems only crop up after years, though, because we've had these rules for years, and only recently did it become like an actual problem. So, an interesting part of it.
Yeah, and I don't think any of our players were like on purpose trying to be like, we're gonna make this broken.
No, you know what I think it is overall is that I've been doing more encounter design, and I'm not very nice. So I think the players feel more emboldened to be ruthless, what I think is part of it.
Yeah,
which is good. I like it.
That's a good point. Well, just to, that's the big thing. I like being super creative on magical items and super creative. And then I guess what I would say is, and I'm speaking a lot from like, oh, if you're running a game, right? Because I don't know, that seems to be the way I'm going with this, but know your party.
Definitely.
Our stuff works because we know our players. Like, we will do another video on this because it's super important to me about like how to run a game that's successful, because I've ran games that have lasted years upon years. In fact, we're on a game now that's session, if you add all the Gauntlet games together, what are we on, session 80? I don't know, 60?
No, like 50 something.
That's still really high.
Yeah, that's a lot of dealing. Each session's 4 to 6 hours, so.
Right. You have to know your players. So everything that we're saying is completely based on that's what our players want and like because they've told us so, and you have to open communication. One thing I do want to touch on magical items is, although, and I think I'm with you. I'm trying to meet you in the middle on this, Bryce. You want to roll for magical items and let the dice kind of choose things because you don't want to be like favoring someone, because then it kind of feels like you're giving handouts. But at the same time, be careful for a game that runs and you have that one character sitting in the corner and maybe they're just not a vocal person, but you find out after session 20 that they still don't have anything.
Yeah.
Like at all. And what happens is that now that the rest of the party is getting magical items, should your game run that way, they're getting left behind. And so as a DM, you have to balance that. Like you're still rolling for stuff, but it's okay to roll 4 items and then put one in there.
Yeah.
Into the loot.
You know, definitely one of my favorite things about D&D is the magic items. And I mean, you know, hopefully you get to play D&D for a long time. This doesn't always happen, but who knows when you're gonna have a chance to, you know, wield a amazing magical sword, or use the deck of many things, or play around with the machine of Lum the Mad. So, you know, finding a way to fit them in your game can make it a lot more memorable. Every time one of those items shows up, we always remember it. So, Machine of Lum the Mad is an amazing role-playing just tool. Same thing with the deck of many things.
Except for when you're a player in the team, you guys like open it up and find out that part of the machine's being powered by a demonic heart. So what does he do?
Yeah. Yeah.
For those that are listening, they found the Machine of Lum the Mad, which, you know, of course, I made my own version of Machine of Lum the Mad.
Because
that's what I think you should do as a DM, right? And they find out that part of it's being powered by the heart of a powerful demon that's like wired into it. So this person who plays in our game, who is also a family member and I love very, very much,
yeah,
pulls it out and takes a bite of it. And I'm sitting there as a DM. Tasty. And this is one of those moments where you're like,
what?
Just go home.
Yeah, you just don't have a reaction. To his credit, he says that he didn't bite it, but everyone else remembers him biting it. So,
right,
you know.
So what really happened? But regardless,
yeah,
I mean, you gotta be able to roll with that stuff. But magical items are great, and they are just such a huge part of Dungeons & Dragons. Don't be scared of them, but just treat them with respect as a DM and a player. Because they can help make your character, and they can help break your character, and they can seriously change the game.